Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Today I'll be walking you through a comprehensive analysis of noise complaints across New York City. This analysis is based on 2 million real 311 service requests spanning from May 2023 to December 2025, giving us approximately 2.5 years of data to identify patterns, hotspots, and actionable recommendations for your administration. Let me start with the four numbers that define our noise problem. First, 50.4% of all complaints are residential noise. That's over 1 million complaints from people being distributed in their own homes. Secondly, 28.7% of all complaints come from just one borough, the Bronx, which is disproportionate to its population share. And third, 42.1% of complaints occur during nighttime hours between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m., telling us exactly when New Yorkers are losing sleep. And fourth, we're receiving an average of 2150 complaints every single day. The bottom line is clear. This is primarily a residential problem concentrated in specific boroughs, happening mostly at night. That focus gives us a clear path to intervention. So, now let's dig into what's actually making the noise. Residential noise absolutely dominates at over 1 million complaints, accounting for half of everything we receive. Street and sidewalk noise comes in second at 22.2%, followed by commercial establishments at 8.7%. What this tells us is that if we can effectively address just residential and street noise, we tackle nearly 73% of the entire problem. Vehicle noise and helicopter noise, which significant at 6% and 4% respectively, are secondary priorities. The strategic insight here is focus upon we don't need to solve everything at once. Targeting residential noise gives us the biggest return on investment. So here's the borough analysis. When we look at where these complaints are coming from, a striking pattern emerges. The Bronx leads with over 573,000 complaints, representing 28.7% of the total. Brooklyn follows at 25.2%, Manhattan at 24.4%, and Queens at 19.5%. Staten Island accounts for just 2.2%. So here's the critical insight. The top three boroughs, Bronx, Brookline, and Manhattan, together generate 78% of all noise complaints citywide. This geographic concentration is actually good news from a resource allocation perspective. Rather than spreading our enforcement thin across all five boroughs, we can achieve maximum impact by focusing our efforts on these three areas. Now, let's talk about when the noise happens, because timing is everything for enforcement. A remarkable 42.1% of all complaints occur during the late night window between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. Evening hours from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. account for another 25%, while daytime complaints make up about 28%. The early morning hours from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. are relatively quiet at just 5%. What this data is screaming at us is that our current staffing model needs to align with when complaints actually peak. If we are running standard daytime operations while 42% of the problem happens at night, we are fundamentally misaligned. Weekend nights, particularly Saturdays, see the highest volumes of all. So this is a heat map. So this heat map makes the pattern crystal clear. The red zones you see uh, represent Friday and Saturday nights between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. This is when New York is at its noisiest. Saturday night is a single highest volume period, followed closely by Friday night. The pattern is consistent week after week. My recommendation based on this data is straightforward. We need to concentrate our enforcement surge during these red zones hours. A targeted deployment on Friday and Saturday nights from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. would address the peak complaint periods when residents are most impacted and most likely to call 311. So this map shows where noise complaints cluster geographically. The highest density areas are in the South Bronx, Upper Manhattan, and the Central Brooklyn. These aren't random distributions. They correspond to dense residential areas with mixed using zoning, active nightlife districts, and in some cases, again, aging housing stock with poor sound insulation. Western Queens also shows elevated activity, particularly around entertainment districts. The practical application here is precision targeting. We know not how just which boroughs to focus on, so but which specific neighborhoods within those boroughs. So this allows precinct commanders to deploy resources with the surgical precision rather than blanket coverage. Let me put the scale of this problem in perspective. Because the numbers are staggering, we receive 2,150 noise complaints every single day. That's about 90 complaints every hour around the clock. So every week, that's the 15,000 complaints. Every month, 65,000 projected annually. We are looking at approximately 785,000 complaints per year. Over the 2.5 years, we analyzed the city processed 2 million noise complaints. Each one of these represents a New Yorker whose quality of life was disrupted enough the lake took the time to file a formal complaint. And each complaint triggers a response, typically an NYPD dispatch, which has real operational cost. The good news is that even a modest reduction, say 15 to 20%, would mean 120,000 to 150,000 fewer complaints annually, translating to significant resources savings and happier residents. So, based on this analysis which I made, here are three actions your administration can take immediately. First, targeted enforcement in the top three boroughs Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. These areas generate 78% of complaints, so that's where our resources should concentrate, specifically during the 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. peak hours. Second, launch a residential noise initiative. Since half of all complaints are residential, we need to partner with landlords and property managers on tenant education. A good neighbor awareness campaign can set expectations and reduce complaints at the source. And third, implement a weekend enforcement surge. Saturday nights are our noisiest period, so we should increase staffing specifically on Friday and Saturday nights from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. These three actions alone, implemented with 90 days, should yield a 15 to 20% reduction in complaints in the targeted areas. Looking at the 3 to 12-month horizon, I have five additional recommendations as well. So, fourth, address street and sidewalk noise, which is our second largest category at 22%. This means reviewing street performer regulations and enhancing enforcement in the entertainment districts. Fifth, improve commercial noise compliance by working directly with bars, clubs, and the restaurants on sound limits and implementing fast track resolution for repeat offenders. Sixth, establish a helicopter noise task force. We received over 80,000 helicopter complaints, and this requires coordination with the FAA on flight paths over residential areas. And seventh, move to data driven resource allocation using complaint pattern to predict hotspots and giving precinct commanders real time dashboards. And eighth, conduct a policy and infrastructure review, including soundproofing incentives for residential buildings and updated noise code penalties. So, with this targeted intervention, if we implement these recommendations, so here's what the data suggests we can achieve. Within 12 months, we should see a 15 to 25% reduction in repeat complaints. That translates to 150,000 to 200,000 fewer complaints annually. More importantly, residents in our target neighborhoods will experience a measurable improvement in quality of life. The bottom line is this data driven enforcement that targets the rich places at the right time can significantly reduce noise complaints while optimizing city resources. We are not asking for more budget, we are asking to deploy existing resources more intelligently based on what the data tells us. So, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation. The data tells a clear story. Noise is primarily a residential problem concentrated in three boroughs, happening mostly at night on weekends. With this targeted intervention, we can make a meaningful differences in the life of millions of New Yorkers. Thank you for your time.